clerics, emulate Jesus. Museveni is telling clerics, and that sort of entreat coming from the president seems to be telling so much about the clerics of Uganda there. Are they following Jesus or not? UWA probes on staff over theft of billions is another story you can follow inside the Daily Monitor if you're waking up in Uganda. And how public service derails private sector superstars. The redeployment of former TANESCO chief Maharage Chande from TTCL to Tanzania Post Corporation within 72 hours is a testimony to the plight of private sector high flyers after being dropped into public service. Not very eligible from a side, but this is what the sub-headline reads, how also the public sector is having a hostile takeover from the private sector, headhunting their top-notch CEOs. That is in Rwanda, or that was in Tanzania. In Rwanda, 6 dams to help cope with climate quakes. Akanyaru is designed for power generation, water supply, and irrigation purposes. And you can follow the story on page 3 of the New Times in Rwanda. Investing in public finance management will foster economic growth. This is what Minister Tusabe is saying. Minister of State in charge of National Treasury can be seen here addressing delegates during the Public Finance Management Coordination Forum in Kigali on Tuesday. In his remarks, Tusabe said, by investing efforts in PFM sector, Rwanda not only ensures physical responsibility, but also creates an environment that fosters economic growth, attracts investments, and ultimately improves the lives of Rwandan citizens. That is the story that you want to follow inside the New Times if you're waking up in Rwanda this morning. And also their calls, which are growing for research funding to address health challenges in EAC. And the leaders, CEOs, Kagame met during UN General Assembly Week. All is tucked away on page 4 of the New Times this morning. The 5th, or the 4th, I should say, Rwanda's President Paul Kagame has said he will run for a 4th term in 2024, with critics putting him in club of African big men who cling on to power. You have his story on page 10 of East African this week. And why Somalia wants ATMIS drawdown halted. Africa Union mission is leaving a security vacuum that Mogadishu cannot immediately plug, even as that has been staggered in phases that will be seeing the last boots leaving, of course, that particular soil in December 2024. Ruto Kagame seek deals with US investors. That is a story that you can follow on page 4 and 5 of the East African this morning. Or a China Daily. White paper elaborates on Xi's global vision. That is a splash today. While community needs multilateralism, development for shared future. Officials say this, and you can read the rest of the story on page 12. Also, big presence of Chinese tech firms at ASEAN shows nation's progress. Gwadar Port crucial for economic connectivity. And you can see men hard at work here. These are rescuers cleaning up a site on Monday after heavy rains caused a river to burst its banks and sweep away 6 homes in Shantytown in Guatemala City, a capital of Guatemala. At least 6 people were killed and 13 others reported missing in the flash floods as of Monday. The rainy season this year claimed 32 lives in the country, according to its disaster management authorities. And also you can read the rest of the story, I should say, inside the China Daily today. The Economist is holding this splash and is following the war in Ukraine. Time for a rethink. And this is the color, all the colors of a Ukrainian flag. Time to rethink helping Ukraine win a long war. That is what the Economist is holding this week. Beyond Factory Asia also is another story. Where next for open artificial intelligence and how to end AIDS. Did India order a hit in Canada? It has been that spot on what we've been following, that particular story of a murder that happened in Canada, a Canadian citizen, where it has sparked a diplomatic row between Canada and India as far as the death of a citizen is concerned who was considered a staunch activist, and now he has been flawed, and all fingers are pointing towards India as far as Canada is concerned. This is The Economist, and the latest in the Newsweek is all about America's most loved workplaces. They're all splashed here as you can see them, and also the week as well. Under spotlight, the claims against Russell Brand of BBC, and that is how it was. Of course, the glare of the cameras were on him, and also the politics in the US continues as can McCarthy stop GOP headliners from shutting down the government? That is a question, and this is how the week is looking today. All right, we shall be showing you the rest as we continue pace with the conversation. Harvard Business Review as well, reskilling in the age of AI, new approaches for managers and employees, and also we have the Fast Company as well, focusing on Microsoft Moments. All right, inside it's AI-powered match to $3 trillion shilling. That is a story that you can follow. Not $3 trillion, not $3 trillion shillings dollars. That is a story that you can follow inside the Fast Company as well. All right, those are your latest and the editor cartoon. You are very welcome. That is a climate fund, and how the Posse of Goon, they are actually making themselves very, very comfortable. Of course, smoking the sushi there. That is a climate fund and adaptation. So there is a story of how also international forces, as far as the climate fund is concerned, are having their own interest, if anything is to go by as far as this editorial cartoon is concerned. We shall be looking at this much later in the course of the program. All right, earlier I had introduced to you Professor Peter Kagwanja and Professor Noah Midamba. Now we're joined by Dr. Ken Mbogi and also Yusuf Hassan as well, who is a member of parliament from Kamukunji, as also is a member of a national or a member of the Defense and Foreign Relations in the National Assembly. We just want to hear from them today. Mheshimiwa, good morning. Good to see you.
Good morning. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yes, indeed.
And thank you for joining us on this other side of the tracks of
I'm a little bit,
global affairs.
I'm a little bit shaky because my professor, my international relations professor, is right sitting next to me here.
I could see he was really questioning if you submitted your assignments.
No, I finished. I did his course with a distinction.
With a distinction?
Oh, wow.
Oh, fantastic. Congratulations on that. Right, also we want to hear from Dr. Obogi. Good morning, good to see you.
Good morning.
Yes.
Good to see you.
Yes, so what we have from you as well, what have you picked currently from the current affairs?
Well, a lot of confusion around the world and competing and contending interests. But a very interesting thing that I've picked, of course, as a historian, is what I see as, the scramble and partition of Africa too. The initial one of, the 19th century, concluded in Berlin in Germany. Now we have a new one, but seems to be taking place without us Africans realizing. There are more players than there were in the earlier one, but what does that portend for this continent, and how are we going to respond to it? Yeah, that's part of the problem that we are grappling with now.
All right. So there's a scramble as well for a huge share. That is 100 million shillings as far as the dialogues are concerned, looking at the dailies as well. But let's start with the ongoing submissions, as I'm mentioning them, to the national dialogue groups at the Moments of Kenya, where the Law Society of Kenya is now recommending that presidential elections be held separately from other 5 elective seats to to give poll losers a second chances to run for other elective positions. Speaking while presenting the LSK views on the 5 issues of dialogue, LSK President Eric Theuri argued that the segmentation and staggering of the polls will lower political temperatures that are often associated with presidential election. The LSK has further opposed the creation of the office of the Prime Cabinet Secretary as well as that of the official leader of the opposition. KTN's political affairs reporter Emmanuel Toro starts us off.
For the 3rd day running, members of the public flocked the Bomas of Kenya's Pavilion Hall to make their voice heard in the ongoing national dialogue. And Tuesday, it was the time for professional bodies and civil society groups to give their views, the Law Society of Kenya being the first to open the forum. LSK is opposed to the creation of the office of the official opposition leader and that of the Prime Cabinet Secretary.
We have considerable difference in appreciating how the Constitution can be amended to accommodate the position of a leader of official opposition. The Law Society will not be in support of any proposals to create such offices. That means that we need to begin to look at the decisions that came from the from the courts on the BBI, on the question of our basic structure.
The LSK boss Eric Theuri making a case for the staggering of elections for various positions.
Is it time to amend the Constitution so that the elections are not held at the same time? Because that way, if Senator Mogeni, who has just left, is serving as a senator and wants to vie for president, he can, because his term in office is still there, he can vie for president. And if he's not elected, he goes back and continues to serve in parliament.
However, the move by the Election Observers Group to confirm the Electoral Agency presidential tally seemed to arc the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya members of the talks team who have maintained the election results were sham.
Results of the PVT, the parallel vote tabulation, which is a scientific methodology we have employed since 2010, 2013, 2017, and 2022, it confirmed IBC's results.
ELOC actually confirmed IBC results?
Yes.
And the Supreme Court overturned?
Yes.
And just for the record.
ELOG, however, wants the audit of the 2022 presidential polls results conducted to put to rest the ghosts of the 2022 elections once and for all. The Center for Multi-Party Democracy, CMD, also made a raft of proposals.
We have a 2020 constitution that is good. There are places where the shoe is too tight. There are places where we need to look at. But I beg you, I beseech you, we cannot go to a referendum in these divisions. It will make an already bad situation much worse.
CMD wants IBC commissioners elected to office 12 months after the elections and should hold office for only 1 term.
Indeed, true, we propose 1 term. With members appointed immediately after election and political parties to nominate, and the chairman can be elected by the members. Our proposal is answering the trust deficit.
The Institute of Certified Public Accountants and the Kenya National Chamber of Commerce also made their presentations. The Attorney General Justin Muturi, the Parliamentary Caucus pushing for additional counties, and other human rights groups will on Wednesday have their day at the Bomas of Kenya. Emmanuel Toro, KTN News, Nairobi.
And of course, Emmanuel Toro will continue telling those particular submissions at the Bomas of Kenya today. And as Kenyans continue to grapple with the high cost of living, a group of leaders under Kamwene Unity Forum has vowed to move to court to challenge the High Court or the High Government's appetite for taxes. According to the group, there is a need to cap the amount of taxes that government imposes on Kenyans. And Grace Ganga has more.
The fight to cushion Kenyans from high taxation by the Kenya Kwanza government will be taken to the corridors of justice. Kamwene Unity Forum, that is fronted by NAK Kenya party leader Martha Karua and former Ndaragwa Member of Parliament Jeremiah Kioni, say they will go the legal route in stopping the government from what they call huge amount of taxes. This, they say, they hope to do so through presentation of a constitutional petition.
We want to set a constitutional limit as to how much money the government can come into your salary as direct taxation. Because this government has gotten to a point where they think they have a right over your salary. They've gotten to a point where they can go to a 70% if they wanted.
This even as the issue of the high cost of living became a bone of contention between Azimio and Kenya Kwanza representatives at the bipartisan talks last week that almost ended in blows. Kioni, who is the chair of the technical committee, left the bipartisan talks meeting after a heated verbal exchange between him and East Africa Legislative Assembly Iela Member of Parliament Hassan Omar.
We gave our proposal that we need a limit as to how much a person can be taxed in this Kenya. And that is what I was telling you. When we gave that proposal, we were told it is a pedestrian way of thinking. So hivi karibuni tutakuja kujua ni nani pedestrian kuliko ule mwingine, kwa sababu serikali Kenya si yetu, Kenya ni ya Wakenya.
Petition inaenda kotini next week.
The petitioner lawyer Fanyamombo Kinothia, who is also a member of the forum, said it is time to make constitutional changes to cap the taxes the government can levy on Kenyans.
Unajua wanatumia V8 ya diesel, these politicians. Diesel is 200 shillings. But paraffin, mafuta taa ya mtu ya kupika ugali, is 202 shillings. So they are trying to finish the person at the bottom. Kenya Kwanza will get to a point where they can tax 99% of your salary, unabaki na shilingi moja.
KTN News has established that the petition will be seeking to have courts pronounce themselves on the matter and declare that a ceiling is set in the constitution on the amount of taxes one can pay. The petition proposes 20% as what the government should take from a person's earnings.
If the government taxes the people of Kenya beyond a certain percentage, that government should go.
Kenyans have been grappling with the skyrocketing cost of living that have been made worse by increased taxations as contained in the Finance Act of 2023. The highest paid form of tax being pay as you earn, which is almost 30%. From July this year, the tax collector scooped another 1.5% to finance the government affordable housing program. There are also pending bills that, if passed, will make Kenyans dig deeper into their pockets. For example, the Unemployment Insurance Bill 2023, sponsored by Ikolomani Member of Parliament Bernard Shinali, which suggests that employees contribute 1% of their income, with a corresponding 1.5% contribution from employers directed towards the Unemployment Insurance Fund. Other proposed legislations are contained in the Social Health Insurance Bill 2023, which aims to replace the National Hospital Insurance Fund and achieve universal healthcare (UHC). If passed, every employee will contribute 2.75% of the gross pay to fund healthcare. Grace Nganga, KTN News, Nairobi.
And let's turn the crack now to fighting corruption, where Prime Cabinet Secretary Musalia Mudavadi has faulted two members of Parliament for proposing bills to amend the country's anti-corruption law in a way that would make it easier for the corrupt to escape justice. While speaking at the launch of the EACC Strategic Plan 2023 to 2028, Mudavadi also praised the achievements of the Commission in recovering stolen assets and securing key convictions. Speaking during the event, EACC Chairman Bishop David Oginde appeared to back President William Ruto's philosophy of Mambo ni Matatu. KTN's Odi Francis Asmo.
Prime Cabinet Secretary Musalia Mudavadi has called on two members of Parliament, Peter Kaluma and Geoffrey Ruku, to withdraw their bills which he claims will claw back on the fight against corruption.
I kindly request the two members of Parliament to consider withdrawing their bills. We must remember that we can only defeat corruption if we stand together in unity of purpose and effort.
He was the chief guest during the launch of EACC 5-year strategic plan. According to Mudavadi, the amendment bill would negate the government's effort to curb corruption. EACC CEO Twalib Mbarak stressed that the need for cultural and political changes to combat corruption.
If we want to counter this monster called corruption, there are three main pillars. The political culture of this country must change. The public must change its culture. The institutions that we have must be strengthened.
The bills sponsored by Mbeere North and Homa Bay MPs propose to replace criminal prosecution for procurement flaws with administrative sanctions and to repeal the provision that bars corruption convicts from public office. EACC has warned that these bills would weaken the anti-corruption legal framework and hamper its work.
Our anti-corruption efforts, therefore, are going to be focused on highly influential persons and highly exposed individuals. We are going to go for those people who have used their offices or who are using their offices to steal Kenyans' resources. We are going to go for those people who are sometimes considered as small fish. But once upon a time, I went and I saw this small fish. It's called piranha.
EACC reported that it received and analyzed 30,523 reports from the public and other sources in the past 5 years, from 2018 to 2023. It recovered assets worth 28 billion shillings that were acquired through corruption or economic crimes and obtained 168 convictions in the courts. It also traced and preserved assets worth 47.9 billion shillings that are subject to ongoing litigation.
The journey towards the automation of anti-corruption court records and proceedings is also in full gear.
This engagement that we have between the EACC and the Office of the Auditor General has been yielding results, as we are able to share information in as real time as possible and carry out joint investigations.
The event comes a day after Renson Mulele Igonga was sworn in as the new Director of Public Prosecutions by President William Ruto at State House, Nairobi. Ode Francis, KTN News, Nairobi.
And those stories, the set, of course, as a segue to a discussion. Just briefly, we look at what is happening locally before we go global. And we want just to hear from our panelists. And we begin with you, Professor Peter Kagwanja, especially on the submissions. There are a lot of issues that have been raised there that maybe we can interrogate as well. The staggering of elections, that the presidential election should be held one day, so that we don't actually lump all these elective posts being subjected to, the voting on a similar day. So in a bid to try and cool the temperatures in the country, do you first of all hold with the views that LSK is submitting to the submission panel? I don't know, what has been your assessment?
I think, thank you, Dibal. I think the first issue that we raised here in this forum was the need for the country to talk and talk, because that's who we are. Africans, we have to talk and talk until we agree. And that's how we arrive at some form of consensus and some form of order. So talking is important, and I don't agree with the title, and I'm sure my colleague, Hassan, Mheshimiwa Hassan will bear with me that
which title?
The shillings 100 million dialogue, which looks like it is basically ridiculing that figure. Don't forget that we are losing 2 billion per day of riot. So 100 million is not very much to talk about, because the nation must talk. But even as we talk, and from the submissions, I would submit that we are back to BBI, the Building Bridges Initiative. We are back there. And we are back there because it has become part of our culture to talk about everything and nothing at the same time. We did that in IPPG. It was about entrenching certain leaders and political parties. We did that in Bomas of Kenya talk. We did that in many other talks, and now there was BBI and all that. I think the only useful talks we have had in this country were the talks for the new constitution after 2008. That period, talks first and all were defined. So there was agenda 4, the 4 agendas. So we knew the scope of the talk. But both BBI and the post-BBI talks, which we are having, are about everything. Some talking about changing electoral system. I think that's not why we started talking. And I think the conveners of this debate, of this talk, must have defined the scope of this. We are not basically talking about founding a new nation called Kenya. We have already done that, and we have spent billions and billions of shillings to agree on certain things. So what we wanted to find out is, how do we deal with the post-COVID-19, post-Ukrainian poverty that has afflicted the country? How do we get out of the mire that we are in regard to where we find ourselves in terms of cost of living, in terms of our economy, and in terms of our social lives, which have been affected by this economy? That is what possibly should have come out of this. But now we are beginning to see the elite negotiations of new prime positions for themselves. I think the Constitution is very clear. For me, the only outstanding issue is a weak opposition. That does not, a weak opposition and a weak framework of opposition that does not allow the leader of opposition, the winner or the second runners-up, the first and the second runners-up, to play a role in the government. And therefore, when they are left out, they become agitators. That's what Raila Odinga has been. You are out, and you are out for 5 years. You have been out for another 5 years. Because the Constitution does not reconcile the support that you have in the public and the inclusion in the government decision making within the period that you have lost. So if you have 6 million or 6 million or so votes, what does it mean for you to stay out when your winner had only 7 million? So the Constitution needed to be reconciled. To me, that is the only outstanding issue. These are the issues of staggering elections, doing this. All those are themselves are secondary issues. Primarily, we need to have a post-COVID recovery plan. Whether you call it a white paper or you call it whatever blueprint, whatever it is, we need that. In order to secure the gains that we had made in the past and ensure that our people do not sink lower. The big problem we have today is that our middle class, which was the fastest growing in the past, has gone down. It is actually declining. Those who are in the lower middle class are now at the level of the poor. Those who are in the upper middle class are now the ones who are trying to be in the upper lower. Yeah, lower class. So in the sense, the big question is the economy. It is economy stupid.
Economy stupid. Let's hear from you, Yusuf Hassan. Just listening to this, they always say that focus creates blindness. And when it started, they were focused on 5 main issues. But right now we can see there is a confluence of issues coming on the table. We can see a melange of that happening. Do you see this also extending in the foreseeable future? Beyond even the 60 days after they get the memorandums, of course, they'll settle down. But will it stretch beyond this term of Kenya Kwanza government?
Well, I think it wouldn't go that far, but it's important for us to allow the process to reach its natural conclusion by allowing as large numbers of people to express their views. I think that is the whole essence of democracy. And I don't see why people are concerned so much about these deadlines. You cannot fix a country by focusing on very narrow and reasonable deadlines.
But we need to tame also the expenditure that comes with that particular exercise itself.
The expenditure that is emphasized here is a bit wrong. I think look at the cost of instability and protest. They cost a lot of money. My neighborhood, which is a trading neighborhood, Isli and Kikomba, lose millions of shillings a day because of this particular type of protest that we have in the country. So I think money should not be an issue if we are going to fix our country and reach a consensus that would extend our stability and our understanding as a country to come together. I think that is much more important than counting the shillings. Because we will be just deploying thousands of policemen every day to maintain law and order is going to cost maybe 100 times more than that over a particular period. So it is for a good cause to have a dialogue, to engage, to express and ventilate our problems, and then to reach some kinds of a consensus to move forward is worth millions and millions of shillings. So I don't see any issue with the money. I think this is a very narrow, myopic view of looking at a country's problems and future trajectory. So I think we should focus on the content. Are these talks going well? Are they delivering? Are people expressing views that would help our country to go forward? Those are the things that I would be looking at. On the issue of staggering the elections, I have participated in 4 elections. And elections are more than just an event. The problem we have is not having our elections at the same time. There are many countries that do that, and you wouldn't even know an election is taking place. I think what we need is to deal with our culture, how we vote, how we engage with politics. There are a lot of wrong things in how we do things. And then, of course, we need to reform our electoral process. The elephant in the room is not because we have the presidential election and all these other elections on the same time. It's just because our electoral body is not efficient enough, is not organized enough, and does not follow the rules and regulations on the day of the elections on the ground. A lot of things go wrong, but when you see the legislation is right, the regulations are in place, but someone is doing things in ways that should not be done. And also to educate the public that the election is not a matter of life and death, that in fact a country can continue after that. On the issue of representation, maybe we could look at introducing some kind of proportional representation, because there are people who feel that even after voting, they are not represented. Certain minorities are not represented, certain political views are not represented, and it is exactly right what Professor Kagwanja said, is that when you get 6 million voters, and then there are another 7 or 8 million or 10 million voters who didn't even bother to come to the elections because they are disaffected or disillusioned, then you cannot say that actually this idea of winner takes it all is kind of part of the tension and the problem that we have in our country. And maybe we need to look at how we can cushion that, because some countries like South Africa and Namibia use proportional representation, and there's more representation of minorities and interest groups there. It has created a more stable electoral system in those countries. So maybe we could also look at ways in the future of how we could bring more people into the power system, because you cannot just sit outside for 5 years and you're expected to keep quiet. So I think there's a way we can accommodate almost everybody who votes in this country to take ownership of our democratic process.
Right. No, Madam, I wonder what also will be your view, because we have Mashimo thinking that at least the 100 million shillings dialogue is a bit myopic, considering what political instability does to a country. What is your assessment?
Debal, both Honorable Hassan and Professor Professor Kagwanja's mentioned very important issues. We must move out of the culture of the zero-sum game and value that as a culture, as our political culture. We must move beyond political campaign so that we look at the issue of development. We are considered lower developed country. Our goal is to move to the middle. And there are 2 major things at the ball that is coming at on the president agenda right now that we really Kenya need to pay attention to. Number 1, Duval, is investors are lining up to manufacture EV cars in Kenya. This is going to be the only African country where this is going to take place. We need an environment that will support that kind of manufacturing culture. There is going to be transportation issue.
Are we talking in regard to the Bomas dialogue? Because we are actually taking views on the Bomas dialogue, or this is a general...
No, the most important thing is we need to deal with this culture. We need to deal with our dialogue in order to support the development I'm talking about. So these two things are crucial. That is what's going to lift us to the middle class. So first is the EV cars, because if we don't, China is poised to be the largest manufacturer of EV cars and will dump all their goods here. The second thing, Dubal, is to empower the long-term talk of opening up Africa for trade. It's about to happen. And we need to use that opportunity so that the consideration of dry dock that happened in Naivasha and move back to Mombasa need to be reconsidered. But all these things, Dubal, will not happen unless Kenya move out of this ongoing talk without any realizing substantive outcome. We need to put this behind us. We need to move on these things so that we can move to the middle class. Now the issue, the ball to go with empowering and manufacturing EV cars has to deal with the electric grid, the power we have in order to support. That will not happen unless we are concurred together as a country. We're moving lockstep and barrel, together.
Right. Thank you. All right. That's briefly before we take a short break. Dr. Ombogi, your sentiments brief.
Thank you, Dibal, and I appreciate what my friends and colleagues are saying. Now, when you look at the Bomas dialogue, fundamentally, there is nothing new. Because our country is actually a product of talks and fights. We fight, we sit, we talk, okay, and then we fight again, and then we sit and talk. And that is the foundation on which this country has been built. Look at, we fought the colonialists in the 40s, 50s, and we say it in the 60s, let's talk. We call them Lancaster conferences, 1 and 2, which gave us the very first constitution in this country. Now, you move in the mid-60s, 1966, 1969, we fight and then talk. Kenya moved on. The mid-90s, 1997, which Prof was calling IBBG, we fight and then say, let's talk, and then we talk. The most recent one, 2007, 2009, is all known to all of us. We fight and then talk. Our constitution, the one we call the new, which is now becoming old, is a product of such fights, and then we talk. And here again, we are in Bomas. We fought in the name of maandamanos and all this, and here again we are saying, let's talk. But what is really missing, and I agree with Professor Kawanja here, is if you look at the history of the talks that we have had before, the scope is very clear. The 1960s, the transition to independence, we needed a blueprint to take us to post-colonial Kenya. But the issue now is what is the scope of the Bomas talks? Everything is being raised, from issues of bread and butter to the interests of the political elites. So the question then will be is what are we going to come out of this with? Could it be that somebody somewhere is using this forum to say, let the Kenyans talk, they are used to talking, And then after that, we deflate the kind of anxiety and public violence that seems to be on the other side recently. And then it will be business as usual. That is our greatest fear. And if then this is talks for the sake of talks, or talks for the interests of the elites, like we had the IBBG in the 1990s, then the country is not going the direction that everybody wants. The issues that we need to address in these talks, in my view, are twofold. One, why is it that after every election, we have the kind of tension that we have in the country? That is actually where we need a fundamental solution. Number two, issues of equity, equality, justice, and fairness, in sharing the resources of the country have been so fundamental. And if these talks address these two, we can leave the rest for future talks, because I'm very sure that we have had this historical pattern of talks. We will have more talks tomorrow, the year after, the decade after. We will continue having talks. It is in our nature as Africans. We are oral societies. So talking is part of what we do, as I was talking in trade of everyday living. So the issue, we need to be very, very clear. In Bomas, I have the impression that we seem to be fearing off the key issues. Sometimes in political strategy, and Professor Gawanja is more qualified to talk about this because he's a political scientist, you allow people to talk, to deflate anxiety and to make the country stable and peaceful.
Indeed.
But that is really administering Panadol to treat cancer.
Right. On already festering wound, I think that does it for this side of the local events as well.